Now, I am really looking forward to this presentation tonight because in my mind, I have always wanted to write a book. But when the little voices up here say do it, the hands say, no, you have the attention span of a gnat. You'll never be able to accomplish that. So I'm impressed by people that can actually do that. And our own Sheila is getting ready to roll out her first book. And I think that is just exciting as all get out. And I've been waiting to hear that. Yeah, jazz hands for her. And I've been really looking forward to hearing the story of how it was born, to how it came out as a baby, and now it's starting to toddle. Pretty soon it'll be walking. And I think this is going to be really, really interesting and inspirational, Sheila. Inspirational. So you better make it good. So Sheila's going to talk about, what do I do with her introduction? Her book journey. It's from Pathways Presentation Mastery. Connect with storytelling, which is a great thing. She will share her journey of the writing of her book from the idea until the first proof is ready. It says her time is 5 to 7 minutes, but she might go over. So Mr. Timer, wherever you went, Bryant, be prepared from anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes, just in case. Here's a heads up. So without further ado, which is another term I really hate, Sheila, let's hear your speech about my book journey. Big jazz hands for Sheila. Yay!
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, President Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. So glad y'all are here with us this evening. It's good to see some new faces. Glad to see some old ones back tonight. The name of my speech this afternoon is My Book Journey. And I, like Brandon, I'm going to have to piggyback off of you, Brandon, but I promise you, I already had it. I want to share a quote with you first. And it's by Zig Ziglar. And this quote is one of my favorite quotes. And when I quote it, y'all have probably heard me quote it in maybe other speeches. You've probably seen it on my Facebook page. But you don't have to be great to start. But you have to start to be great. The ideal or the desire to write a book was probably maybe in about 5 or 6 years ago. It actually started probably around the time that I found my new love of reading in 2014. After reading books and consuming books, I began to think to myself, hey, I can do this. I can write books. I can write inspirational, motivational, inspiring books. Not really thinking about this particular book that I have wrote. But also over the last 8-9 years, I have shared my story, the story that I wrote about in this book. I've shared this story on not numerous occasions, maybe 4 or 5 times when I felt like it was appropriate. Because this is not the kind of story that you sit around the campfire and tell all your buddies. This is a story of failure. This is a story of mistakes. This is a story of also of redemption and restoration. And sometimes when I would be in the presence of someone that maybe felt like they had failed, they were too far gone, God couldn't use them, or whatever they were feeling, sometimes I felt impressed to share that story with them about my mistake and my failure and how God brought healing and restoration in my life. But then I also would tell them, and they would tell me, you ought to write a book about that. And I would tell them, I would love to write a book about that. I really would. But how do you write a book that is so personal, that is so raw? And how do you write a story about something where you are still connected with these people? You are still in their community. How do you write that? So that story, it just lingered in the back of my mind in the last 4 or 5 years. Well, in 2018, Little did I know that God was going to begin to deal with me and my husband to come out from the church that we attended and come to a different city and start a work for him. And that, my friend, opened up the door for me to start to write my book. In 2018, this is what I love about this, and God just connected the dots all along the way. He connected them. And there's the timing is always, there's always a reason and a purpose for the delay or the timing. In 2018, it's in my phone. July 2018, God dropped that title in my spirit, Life After the Mistake. I wrote it in my notes, and I actually put in there, Life After the Mistake. It's coming, it's going to flourish, and God's going to put his hand on it. I was decreeing it and declaring it and wrote it down. But it would be 8 months later before I would start writing that book in 2019 in February. Well, this is how Greek I was. But I'd heard enough of YouTube to start where you was. Start with what you had. If you don't know what to do, start with what you do know what to do. I got out pencil and paper, a notebook, a spiral back notebook and ink pen. I wrote about 5 pages. The further I got into it, I was saying, I can't do this. I can't write this. I cannot write this story. How am I going to share this story? So I set it down, I set it aside, and I just was kind of like at an idle time. But then I began to stroll through Facebook one day, and my friend Christy popped up with a book for sale. Now, me and Christy, we are real good friends now, but at the time we were just acquaintances. We ended up a lot of times at the same church functions because our churches were connected. I seen that she wrote a book and she had it for sale. Well, I messaged her. I said, hey, how did you do that? What's the process? What did you, and that's when I found out about Google Docs and Microsoft Word. I had no idea about those kind of things, but you know what? I started with what I knew how to do was a pencil and paper. That's how I started. Well, to come to find out, Christy had not even published her book. She was still in the editing phase. And 3 or 4 months, I helped her edit her book while mine laid aside. I shared with her my story. I shared with her the book that I was wanting to write. And I shared with her, her book was pretty raw too. And so we connected there. It was on a different level, but it was still like transparent. It was putting everything we had out to the public to read. And as she published her book, I'm still just kind of like waiting around like, God, I want to finish my book. I want to write my book. Okay, I'm strolling through Facebook again. I'm a Facebook person. June 2019, a pastor friend of mine has commented, or no, he posted something on his page. And he said something like about, he wanted to write a book about divorce and second marriages in the church or something like that. And how many would read it. I don't remember just what his question was. But there was a lady named April that commented on his post. I had one mutual friend with her, and that was him. And she says, I don't know nothing about the subject, but I could help you write the book. Well, my antennas went up. What? Somebody that knows my friend knows how to write a book too? So I comment on her comment, and it just goes from there. We begin to message one another. About a week later, we're on the phone with one another. About 3 weeks later, we're in Dyersburg, Tennessee, meeting in person. By this time, I have laid aside Life After the Mistake. I've started a whole new book called New Beginnings. I said, I'll just write my story about me and my husband coming over here and how God opened the doors for us and how he made a way. And my husband sold some very special guns. They were very special to him. He sold them guns for us to come over here and rent this building, get this work started. We were passionate and we were happy. And we were glad that God was moving in our lives. Well, she says to me, she says, well, I can help you, but she don't act like she's too intrigued when I meet her. But I don't want to jump ahead of myself. But when I meet her, she has her mother with her. Her mother is a retired graphic designer. I'm like, yeah. I mean, it was just like I was watching God literally connect the dots to connect me to the right people, to bring me to my expected end. So she begins to tell me, but I tell her, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I begin to tell her that you can't really appreciate the new beginning without the backstory, because there was nothing really, what you say, out of the ordinary about my new beginning story, because a lot of people start works. A lot of men and women go to cities and start a work or start a church, and God blesses them and God opens doors for them. That's not really an unusual story. But I told her, I said, what makes the story very special, though, is the backstory. So I sit there and I tell my story to two strangers. And of course, the time I get through, their mouths are, open, and they're like, what? But she says, Sheila, I can help you. You've got to put them two stories together. That's a beautiful story of redemption. It's the story of humility, how that you were brave enough to go back where you fell, to go back and make things right. She said that's a redemptive story and a beautiful story. So she begins to tell me, she says, I will help you. I'll charge you $500. That's what I went to meet her to see if we were a good fit. And if we were, how much she was going to charge to help me. She said, I'll charge you $500 and be your creative coach. I will help you bring the books together. I'll help you transition from one to the other. And I will come in and give you pointers and give you things that you could enhance your writing with. And I said, okay, that sounds great. I come back home. I tell my husband. He's like, sure, we'll do what we can. She said I could pay half up front and pay the other half later. So I get on the ball, and I bake sweets. I started asking my church family, hey guys, I need to sell some sweets. And they're like, sure, we'll buy some from you. We'll help you out. Well, about a week and a half later, I get a message from April. Now, April, I didn't really give you no backstory on her. April had wrote her book. She had wrote a book, but she had went through this company called Book Launchers, and she was paying a monthly fee to them. But now all she did was write the book, and they kind of come in and edit it and helped her structure it. But they published it, they advertised for her, they put it out on 4 or 5 different platforms for her, but she paid for that. But I didn't have $4,000 or $5,000 or $1,500 a month to pay someone to continue to market my book. Well, she messages me about a week and a half after we've met, and she says, Sheila, the Lord has laid it on my heart to help you and not charge you. And I was tore up from the floor up. So, but you know what? I went in there and told my husband, and I was crying, and I said, I'm going to tell you, God is remembering me. He saw that I sowed into Christy's life. He saw that I put my book aside for, I would say, almost 4 months, and I helped Christy with her book, not expecting nothing back from her. Now, she said she was going to help me, but Christy's a very busy woman. She has 4 children. She goes to college. She's very active in their church. So I knew her time was going to be limited when it come time to helping me. And so God brought April in under me to help me. So as April took me under her wings for about 8 or 9 months, we sent stuff back and forth. And I promise you, she took words, she took my book, stuff that I would have cut you with. She took it and she smoothed out the edges, and she would reword stuff. She would take stuff that I didn't mean it the way it sounded, but that's just the way that I wrote, or that's the way I talked. And she would take it and reword it for me to where that it would sound right when the reader would read it. And she restructured it for me. She helped me, but she never lost my voice. And that's what I liked about her. Because, you know, when you write a book, you have your voice and it travels through that whole book. And so you want someone that when they help you, you don't lose your voice through that. You don't lose your place in that book. So, and she says, okay, Sheila, I've took you as far as I can take you. She had combined my books. We come a long way. I went from like 10,000 words to almost 30,000 words with April. So 20,000 words in about 8 months with April helping me. But she could only help me like 2 or 3 hours a week. But I wasn't complaining because I knew that God sent her, and I knew that the timing was of God because the book is so, like I say, it's going to be a rough book, tough book for some readers. Not anything bad or anything. It's just what happened. So she says, I'm going to connect you with a friend of mine. Now, this lady took her book and she did some kind of journal. What was it? A companion journal. She did a companion journal for April's book. And she said, she's awesome. She's an editor at a Christian newspaper, but they also do literature for churches and Sunday school classes and Bible studies. So she's an editor, a professional editor already, but she also did this on the side. And she says she's very reasonable and she's sweet, and I believe she would help you a great deal. She connected me with Sinclair, and Sinclair sent me three prices, and I chose the middle price. It wasn't bad. It really wasn't bad at all. I was thankful for that. But she's went above and beyond what she asked me for. And right now we're on our third proof. I've been on Amazon even today, looking at it in the Amazon platform. So it's close, guys. It's close. It's close. And I'm excited. It's been a journey, but it's been a sweet journey. And I'm thankful for it. And I'm thankful for all of y'all. You know, when I came into y'all there in Jonesboro, y'all encouraged me and y'all were excited. And that made me feel good and made me want to push on with the book. It is a challenging thing to do, but I'm thankful that I did it, and it's fixing to be here. My fruit is fixing to be here. My labor is fixing to be here. And I want to say next week I'm signed up for another speech, and I'm going to be persuading you to buy the book. Postmaster?
All right. Of course, everyone has to be, you know, suitably autographed and with, you know, messages inside the cover, you know, so we can put them in plastic and keep them. So in 20
That's
years,
right.
they'll be extremely valuable. Excellent. Thank you, Sheila. I was excited to hear that story. I knew there was a backstory to your book, and, you know, you've just told about it in bits and pieces, and that really kind of brings us all together and up to speed. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. It was truly an inspiring story. And I bet if we had 2 or 3 hours and some coffee and some sweets that you were making, you could probably tell us the whole thing. It'd be really exciting. Not that I need any sweets or anything, but